Hi everyone, it's Dave from Doctors of Running, and today we are going to be doing a comparison video between the Nike Vomero 18 and the Nike Vomero Plus with a little addition of the Nike Pegasus Premium. I wanted to go over some of the premium and maximum cushioned offerings from Nike. Specification wise, things actually look pretty similar. They're all 10 millimeter drop platforms. They're all give or take about 45 millimeters of stack. So what are the differences? And so we'll go over the stack heights first. From what I have been able to find, it's a little bit tricky on some of the sources. Things are a little bit different, but we're looking at 45 millimeters of stack in the Pegasus Premium, 44 millimeters of stack in the Vomero 18. That's from Running Warehouse. I had to do a little bit of digging for the Vomero Plus because that one is still coming to the market, and Nike doesn't really give the stack heights. They'll give you the drop and they'll give you the weight for their sample size, but they don't really give you the stack heights. So according to Running Warehouse, this one's at 43. So we'll go into some of the differences, but all those are 10 millimeter drop platforms. So you can bank on about 43 to 45, 10 millimeter drop to about 33 to 35 millimeters of stack in the forefoot for all of them. All of the shoes have a surprisingly similar weight as well. So give or take about 300 grams in the sample size. What that looks like in ounces. Now again, there were some inconsistencies when I looked across different sources, so I just want to give you my men's 9.5 weights. And so with the Vomero 18, it was about 11 ounces. With the Vomero Plus, that was right around 10.2 ounces, so it was lighter, significantly lighter, and that was actually consistent across all sources. And then the Pegasus Premium being the heaviest, right around 10.5 ounces, or 11.5 ounces, my apologies. And yeah, we'll go into the differences right now. So when we look at the Vomero, one of the reasons why I believe it's heavier is the upper feels just a little bit thicker in the Vomero 18, and then the midsole is actually slightly different. So even though you see the word Zoom X on there, it's a blend of Zoom X. It's a dual density midsole between Zoom X and React X. And I think that does come off in the ride. It gives a very structured but plush experience. You have a pretty rounded heel and you have a decently rounded forefoot. This definitely feels a little bit heel heavy in the shoe, so it's definitely kind of a very structured kind of feeling heel with kind of a gradual and kind of late toe spring on the rocker. This is nice for easy shuffling miles. It does feel durable for what it's worth as far as the foam and the outsole go, but it does feel a little bit heavier. The upper is pretty plush. Everything about this shoe does feel decently plush. You have a pretty stiff but padded heel counter. The fit is also more accommodating than the Pegasus as well. So this has a pretty plush heel collar, a little bit wider through the heel and the midfoot, and you got a little bit more space in the forefoot with volume. I wouldn't say it's wide compared to a lot of other companies, but it is a little bit more spacious compared to a lot of the other neutral shoes on the market. When we look at the Vomero Pegasus, my apologies, Vomero Plus, this shoe, it feels more plush and accommodating, but it's actually lighter, so it's kind of funny. I think the upper material is just a little bit nicer on the Vomero Plus, and you just have a little bit more forefoot volume, and so it's very airy, but it still feels very plush and cushioned. The dimensions for the most part are similar. I think the general fit is the same as far as width goes, but I do feel like there's a little bit more forefoot volume. One of the reasons why this shoe is lighter is because it is pure Zoom X. And so if you have the same stack height and one's kind of a more dense foam and one's a little bit more lighter reactive foam, that can account for some of the weight loss. And it's kind of funny because they actually have more outsole coverage on the Vomero Plus. And I think it gives it a nice ride. When we look at the ride on this one too, this one does feel a little bit more rockered when you're running in it. You have a little bit more of a larger rounded heel, and then the toe springs are pretty similar across the two, but I think kind of the more rigid platform with the full outsole coverage actually feels a little bit nicer and more balanced of a rocker profile in the Vomero Plus versus the Vomero 18. I think the heel just feels a little bit more, it feels very heel heavy in the Vomero 18. Not a bad thing if you're a heavy heel striker or you just kind of like to shuffle off of it, but I feel like for the more complete experience and the lighter experience, the Vomero Plus actually is pretty refreshing and nice. When we look at the Pegasus Premium, this is kind of the wild card of the bunch. It's the heaviest, but it has the most interesting ride. Not nearly as rockered as the other two. This is a very neutral platform, and it's built off of the Pegasus platform. I don't have confirmation of whether or not they used different lasts when they designed these shoes, but they definitely used different geometries and philosophies. When you think of the Vomero, you can almost think of like a big bubble. They wanted to give you a maximum cushioned experience, and you can kind of see that when you look at the frame of this shoe, you have pretty large sidewalls and kind of a rounding of the platform. And that's across the board with both Vomero models, but it's a little bit more exaggerated in the Vomero Plus. When you look at the Pegasus, this is kind of like your traditional high drop neutral trainer. Not too much rocker to it. And this one does have a little bit of a difference in the midsole as well. So you have a top layer of ZoomX with a middle layer of Air Zoom and a bottom layer of ReactX. This won't be a shoe for everyone. I will say the heel and the midfoot are pretty narrow when we flip it over for how much foam is underfoot and how soft the shoe is. This will not be for people that have heel or midfoot instabilities, but the forefoot actually has decent width to it, and I felt like the responsiveness through the forefoot was pretty good. And so for those that kind of land a little bit more in the midfoot or in the forefoot, this shoe does have quite a bit of pop when you go off the forefoot. Ironically, being the heaviest of the bunch, it actually doesn't feel too bad when you pick up the pace, but I will say that instability starts to show itself when you're taking sharper turns. But if you have a lot of like long rhythmic miles and you are a little bit more anterior when you land, the shoe is actually pretty fun. I think it responds when you load that forefoot a little bit more. But if you are kind of more on the heel side of things, it can be a little bit unstable. I think I kind of like being just slightly faster than daily paces in this shoe, but it's a pretty niche crowd. I think there's probably better options out there. But if you are a little bit more anterior when you land and you kind of like having a real bouncy forefoot, this shoe actually is pretty good. You can feel the Air Zoom unit. It doesn't feel like a gimmick in this shoe. I do feel like there's a little bit of a give in the platform, and it does almost feel almost like gel-like. And when you load it, you can get a kind of a noticeable bounce and responsiveness out of it. So it was a fun ride. I don't think I would use it myself. I tend to be a little bit more rear foot to the midfoot. I go a little bit more anterior when I go faster, but that's probably why I like it a little bit more when I go faster. But for those that land a little bit more anterior, I do think this is a pretty good option. So just to kind of break things down, again, all of these are considered daily trainers. They are all neutral. I will say for those that have considerations for like the quote unquote stable neutral, the Vomero is probably what you're gonna lean more towards. You have a little bit more of a structured kind of foam in the heel, kind of a wider platform. It's not super wide, but it's wider than the Pegasus. And if you are sensitive to the heel and you really want sidewalls, the sidewalls are taller in the Vomero Plus, and you have a little bit more outsole coverage. So I found the Vomero Plus to kind of be more that quote unquote stable neutral while still being lightweight. And I actually really enjoyed that ride for easy mileage. None of these shoes feel super great at fast paces. I actually think the Pegasus Premium probably feels the best when you start loading it and going faster. The Vomero feels more like a traditional plush daily training experience on that end of things. But yeah, I think that's kind of what you're going to go for. So you're going to be looking at kind of like a slightly more structured rockered experience in the Vomero, a little bit heavier, a little bit more thicker upper. If you want the streamlined version with taller sidewalls and a little bit more outsole coverage, you've got the Vomero Plus, and you have the Nike Pegasus Premium for those that want that bouncy and rigid forefoot, and you don't mind a little bit of instability in the midfoot and the heel. For the viewers that are looking for my personal choice on these shoes, I think for right now, I am leaning Vomero Plus for my personal choice out of the three. So that is our summary for the Nike Vomero 18, Vomero Plus, and Pegasus Premium.